Hello, everybody. This is Parrish Alford with the Daily Journal. I'm joined by Matt Wyatt. Matt, gosh, I don't even know how to introduce you anymore, man. You're like, number one, it's been a long time. Number two, so many irons in the fire for Matt. So how do I introduce Matt Wyatt these days?
Parrish, I don't know how to answer that either. You're supposed to be able to just very succinctly give what a 1 or 2 line little title there, host a radio show.
This.
Yeah. And you're kind of in that world too. I host a radio show every day that's on in Jackson, and it replays in a couple of other towns in Mississippi. Of course, I do the color analyst work for state football. I make a good sizable, maybe not a majority, but a large portion of my living doing video production projects and different kinds of things that I've kind of gotten into. So I don't know what you call it, just a guy scratching and clawing to put food on the table. Maybe that's it.
How about Matt Wyatt, sports guy from state with irons in the fire? Okay. How about
bingo? Sports guy.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, Matt, and we were joking about this off air just a minute ago, but you were playing when I was covering state, and then I changed beats in 2002. I think, Matt, this might be the first time I've asked you questions since like 98, 99. Does that sound right?
It might be. I'm trying to think if there was a radio, because you used to do a weekly show in Tupelo, and I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
I might have slipped in on that at some point, but this is, if not the first, is pretty close to it since about 98. That wasn't that long ago. 98 was not that long ago, Perry.
I act like that was a long time ago. The younger people act like that was like so long ago, but hey, man, I think the 80s were like just yesterday. Look, I want to talk to you about state's quarterback competition. Before we get there, I wanted to ask you specifically about quarterbacks in the SEC, how they line up this year. In your opinion, I mean, I know Ole Miss is returning Matt Corral, very productive last year, led the nation in total offense. And I've seen some preseason rankings. I know Cole Kubelik came out with his list of quarterbacks and had JT Daniels of Georgia, the Southern Cal transfer, ahead of Corral. And I know that the list from Pro Football Focus has Corral a good bit of distance ahead of JT Daniels. SEC quarterbacks overall, Matt, what do you think the group is like?
It is a good group, Parrish. It's SEC quarterbacks. It's kind of like JT Daniels said at SEC Media Days last week. If you're playing in this league, you're good. I don't care if you're second string or third string. You're a good football player if you're here. All right, so it's a good group. But it's largely unknown, right? This is not a year where you're coming back and you have a Manziel coming back, leading the group, a Dak Prescott coming back, leading the group for his senior year. And these others, you don't have a Tua and a Fromm like you had those years at Alabama, Georgia. So it's unknown. But I think what you touched on there, Corral and Daniels, are people that understand the position and watched them last year. And last year was a weird year. Know, like, the talent is there. Okay. This is SEC quarterback class, and they're all really good. And I feel the same way. Okay. As far as stacking them up, it's really hard for me to differentiate going into the year between JT Daniels and Matt Corral. But this I know. These are things I know. JT Daniels is legit. He's big time. He's a first rounder. He's 6'3". He's a lot bigger, taller than you think. He's not as fast as Matt Corral. But you get to a certain point in quarterback where fast doesn't really matter. You know what I'm saying? It's how you move around. And watching him last year, the difference he made for Georgia once he got on the field, and that first one was against State, Parrish, where State's defense goes in there and completely shut down Georgia's run game. Just shut it down. They had like 8 yards rushing, and JT Daniels still threw for 400 and something yards, 3 or 4 big plays, and won the game because he was 10 of 11 passing on third down. Just this clutch gene and the ability to hit the deep ball. And he didn't even need a run game to go throw for 400. He did the same thing against the same scheme against Cincinnati, a really good football team, in their bowl game. So I don't have any doubts what JT Daniels is. Full offseason as a starter. Todd Monken, a track record of developing pro quarterbacks. He did it at Southern Miss. He can do it at Georgia if he can do it at Southern Miss. So I have no doubts about him. And I don't have any doubts of what Matt Corral is. My opinion, tough, gritty ball player, will use his legs. You know, he's not as big. What is he, 6'1"? Maybe.
They may listen,
you know, yeah, may list him at 6'2". That's plenty big enough. Throws a deep ball as good as anybody in the country and is playing for the right coach. So there's no doubt in my mind he's going to be better. They'll be better. He probably is not going to have that 5-6 interception game this year like he did last year at some point, you know, so that'll even out a little bit. I don't have any doubt that those two are at the top of the class. But then I would tell you these unknowns, and then this is a long answer. Bryce Young at Alabama is uber talented, has not played, but's got the best collection of people around him. Okay. And we see what Alabama quarterbacks can do within that team because they have such good players around them. His numbers will be through the roof. They'll be good, but you know, he won't be the best in the league this year. Bo Nix at Auburn, tremendous unknown because Bo Nix is an above average athlete with a very talented arm in terms of strength and stuff. And finally is going to play in a system that might be a little more conducive to learning how to be a passer. In the Malzahn system, you just don't learn that. And he didn't. So I don't know what he's going to do. And then the other thing, the outlier and all this quarterback stuff, Parrish, look at what Mike Leach's system does everywhere he goes and has always done. And that is a quarterback jumps up and throws for 4,000 yards at some point and lights everybody up. And so you have a really good group at the top. For me, there's no doubt what JT Daniels and Matt Corral are. I think Daniels, without question, a first rounder in the NFL people's mind already, whether people are talking about it or not. And there's a few that already think Matt Corral is, and he can play himself into that first round this year.
Tell me about the Mike Leach system. Yes, you hit on it. We've seen quarterbacks you never heard of before. All of a sudden, you know, they're like big names in points and yards and just really excelling in that system. So many questions before he arrived at Mississippi State as to whether the Mike Leach system would work in the SEC. They did not put a lot of points on the board last year. What did you observe last year? And, does it work? Will it work in the SEC this year?
Yeah. You know, it does work and it will work. It began to work at the end of last year. And it's about what you would expect, I think, without a spring and without an off season. It's a little bit of making an excuse, and they didn't make excuses. I guess I'm sort of making one for them. But they went through some stuff last year that the Mike Leach system has never been through, okay, which is no spring practice before the season, no summer gathering and throwing and working on routes like you're supposed to because they wouldn't let them. COVID hadn't made them stay away until August. And then the third thing is he's never started a true freshman at quarterback before. Last year's the first year he ever did it. Now, he didn't start the year with Will Rogers, but, you know, finished with him. So there were all these, you know, things. And sure enough, if you look, take Parrish, take Jaden Walley as an example, right? He's a freshman receiver who's going to be a future big-time player for you. He was a true freshman last year. He had no catches in the first game, didn't even show up. The next 4 or 5 games, he was like a couple of catches for maybe 30, 40 yards in each game. And then all of a sudden, second half of the year, boom, Georgia, Ole Miss, I forget, Missouri, Vanderbilt. He had 4 100-yard receiving games. Auburn had 4 100-yard receiving games in a row. One of those, he set a freshman record in the Egg Bowl, more catches, more yards than anybody. So I guess what Will Rogers throws for 400 yards, like set a record for the Egg Bowl. What I saw in the second half of last year is once players start to get it, like, how do I do my job, what they're telling me to do, it just starts to pile up passing numbers. Okay, so if you, without using all your time and just putting every viewer you have asleep, understand that in this system, number one, it's about getting the ball out of your hand on time, so you're not holding the football, eliminate sacks, and then number 2, the accuracy. And then it's strictly a zone man game. If it's zone and teams are dropping, we in that offense are supposed to be able to do this, dink 4 yards, 5 yards until everybody's sick of it. You can't stop us from completing the 4-yard pass. So you've got to come up and play some man, or else we're just going to do it right down the. And when you jump in man, that's when we go over your head, right? Every offense is trying to do that. They do that at Ole Miss. They do it really well at Ole Miss. They just do it in a different way. They're using the run game. They're using motion. They're zone read with a quarterback. They're not doing that in Mike Leach offense. His zone read or hitting you underneath is just an extended handoff screen pass. We'll run that 4 times and make you come up. So that's what leads to the completions. The accuracy must be there. And so that's why I think at State this year, Parrish, in fall camp, you're going to have a legitimate quarterback competition because Abraham is experienced. He's already thrown for 7,000 yards in his career. He was a 70% guy 1 year at Southern Miss. He played in Tuscaloosa. He played in Starkville against those teams that had better athletes. So you just plug him into the competition. You have to consider him. He could go be the guy that gets you up and down the field better. And because Will is so young, if Jack wins the job, they're going to play Jack. I still think Will has an advantage. He's a taller, longer athlete, probably more upside, better athlete when he runs. He's an outstanding leader. Team loves him. He loves the weight room, all those things. But he's brand new. You know, like last year's almost not even a real true freshman year. So if he doesn't win it, they're going to play Jack Abraham, and Will Rogers will have a chance to win it in the future. That said, I wouldn't be surprised at all if, Will Rogers is ahead from day one and just stays there.
Matt, the State fans and other State people that I know described Will Rogers last year as the quarterback of the future. I thought it was odd that that Jack Abraham would come into this environment. But as you explained the offense, I know those are Jack Abraham's strengths. Okay. I know accuracy in a short game. He does really well in those. I don't think Jack Abraham comes into an environment for his last year of college football where he believes that that he won't play, that he won't have an opportunity. I think he at least believes he'll have an opportunity, as you're saying here, to win the job. Is that kind of look? I mean, it sounds like you think it's a real competition. This is not about this is not a Mike Leach production, so to speak, that they're fixing to have in camp.
I absolutely, Parrish. And you've covered a lot of different categories of quarterback competitions, right? I mean, you were there when Coach O's, before they even practiced, said Brent Shaver's a starting quarterback. You were there for that. So that's on one end of the spectrum. You were there in those late 90s. We'd go into camp when I was playing, and one year I'm the starter. I get benched. Wayne starts playing. He takes us to the championship game. Right the next year, you're hearing whispers of there's a competition. Wyatt's back in there pushing. You've seen everything on the spectrum. I think you're nailing this, especially when you look at Mike Leach's track record. It's not hey, I'm going to show everybody how old school of a coach I am. We're going to have a real competition. No, it's just everywhere he's ever been. He didn't care if you're like a 6'5" freshman or a 6 foot tall transfer senior Gardner Minshew. He just doesn't care. We're going to practice, and then we'll get a couple of weeks into it and start to see which one of you is getting us up and down the field a little more. And then let's take it into the third week when they're the reps down to 2 guys. Now these 2 guys right up to the first game, if this guy over here is the one who's getting us in the end zone more in practice, we're just going to play that guy. And oh, by the way, once we start playing you, you're the guy. We're going to play that guy. And he's always approached it that way. And he's going to approach it that way here. It's just, you have to do that. When you got receivers working their fannies off to get open, to run routes, Mike Leach's system, the receivers run more than any group of receivers in the country in preseason camp. And when your team's working that hard, they know who the best quarterback is. By the time you're 2.5, 3 weeks into the year, they know who the best one is, and you better play that guy. And that's why I say, yeah, Abraham's got a chance. If he goes and does it in fall camp, they'll play him.